This is a true story. This is the story of a criminal who meets a spineless insurance salesman and agrees to kill his bully, mostly because he wants to see how far he can push the insurance salesman before he snaps. It's the story of an insurance salesman who asks the criminal to kill his bully, then beats his own wife to death and lies and cheats and steals to get away with it. It's the story of a young female police deputy trying to figure out who killed the insurance salesman's wife, shot the police chief, stabbed a local trucking boss in a whorehouse, and who exactly is the dead naked guy in the woods. It's the story of a widowed state patrolman who lets that criminal escape and then feels compelled to track him down. It's a story about consequences, about what happens when a civilized man puts on his mucklucks and tromps out into the wilderness, and how the wilderness he brings back infects him and the world around him. It's the story of a place where the sedate innocence of unremarkable American life collides with the lawless frontier. Mall food and frozen tundra, pee-wee hockey games on thin ice. It's the story of a people we long to be, simple, kind, neighborly, versus the people we fear the most, hardened, vicious, unfeeling. Yes, we have problems, in other words, but look who's solving them. These words, lifted directly from the iconic series Bible for the TV show Fargo, put it in terms both more fitting and more evocative than I ever could have. The Fargo series is, and was, many things. An anthology series, a reimagining of a beloved Coen Brothers film, a blackly comic romp through snowblind Minnesota, a study of good and evil, or, in the words of creator Noah Hawley himself, a unique brand of true crime story, part tragedy, part farce, in which simple, good-hearted people come face to face with something monstrous. But more so than any of that, it was a complete fucking surprise. A shocking 10 out of 10 that, despite the temperatures and the era, warmed my even then cynical heart, serving as a rare reminder of the artistic heights that a project can reach, even when, at first blush, it may sound like a cheap cash grab.
You take that back.
Because, as it bears repeating, Hollywood is far more a town of show business than show business, meaning that the commercialist tail is more often than not wagging the dog.
Money, please.
But in rare cases, artists like Noah Hawley, supported by artist-friendly networks like the then burgeoning FX, can have their cake and eat it too, making a project that Trojan horses incredible artistry into a commercially appealing package.
She gave me a tug once.
Now, a decade later, the Fargo series is still in full swing as a prestige TV powerhouse, with its latest season serving as a return to form after the missteps of the fourth season, still attracting incredible talent and still churning out tales that could exist nowhere other than snowy, Coen-esque Minnesota. But the series only stands as tall as it does today because of the very firm ground it was built atop. The first season of Fargo was a triumph, to be sure, but its keystone and its bedrock was its pitch-perfect pilot. Smarter Man would have gone for like a rule of threes thing there, but how many synonyms for bedrock are there, really? Oh, backbone. Backbone would have been a good one. Hello, and welcome back to Why Do We Like? I'm Grant Lease, your host, a comedy writer, Hollywood development exec, and big nerd. And today I'll be breaking down the iconic igloo that is the Fargo pilot. We'll break that igloo into its constituent ice blocks, taking a look at each, the writing, the filmmaking, the music, and more, to understand what makes it all tick, to mix a metaphor, before putting it back together again, and crawling back inside to enjoy some ice fishing and a nice cup of joe. Okay, I'm from Minnesota, but for some reason that accent always comes out as Irish. That's the best you're gonna get out of me here. And though part of the joy of this channel for me is getting to break down things into all of their parts, we're going to be looking at the Fargo pilot with a specific emphasis. How goddamn perfectly it did everything that a pilot needs to do. And as there is no master book of Hollywood principles, life would be a lot easier if there were, that lays out everything a screenwriter should do, everything a pilot should do, then I propose the following, a 3.5 part rubric for pilot perfection. Number 1, establishing an interesting, unique story world. Number 2, filling that world with compelling characters. And number 3, telling a great, capital D dramatic story within those confines. And 3.5, one that works not just in its own right as a single episode, but that also makes a dramatic promise of a season's worth of great stories to come. Now, grab your parkas, strap on your earmuffs, and gas up your auger, because we're about to dig through the ice and into the frosty pass. Bemidji, Minnesota, 2014. Wait, you guys didn't have an auger? In the beginning was the Bible. Not that Bible, of course. I mean the series Bible. Remember this?
This is the story of a criminal.
Those words were ripped straight from the series Bible for Fargo, a now iconic document in TV development and screenwriting circles. A simple 12-page doc, title page inclusive, that presented creator Noah Hawley's take on the Fargo universe. A take being a Hollywood proper noun for how you would do something. Whenever a network or studio wants to reboot an old IP or turn a very basic idea that some exec had into an actual feature film, an actual project, they invite screenwriters across the town to pitch their takes on how they would turn that concept into the full thing, be it a movie, a TV show, or the like. A recent example, Barbie. That was a film that had been in development hell for many, many years. Amy Schumer was attached at one point, and many screenwriters were involved before Greta Gerwig and Noah Baumbach got to pitch their take and land the gig, with that having been chosen above all the others. And here it was Noah Hawley's vision that won the day, his take. So in putting his ideas together, he assembled that take into this Bible. Although perhaps a better word would be treatment. Honestly, there's a lot of names for the various bullshit documents that writers are forced to work on, often for free, in order to turn a show from a concept into reality. In general, Bibles tend to be the most involved ones. Dozens and dozens of pages as opposed to, like this one, a dozen. And these documents, these Bibles, get way deeper into the nitty-gritty of characters, world, themes, episodic, and even season stories, and more. The more trimmed down version are treatments. These tend to be more of a higher level view of what the Bible will then spell on much later with wordy completeness. So this document definitely has more treatment vibes and is frankly a bit vaguer, more evocative than descriptive than even a lot of the treatments that I see. But to further confound things, this document itself, on its title page, simply bills itself as a series document, which doesn't even have a true definition of its own, and is maybe the vaguest thing a creative person could possibly think of to describe their artistic vision. But to put this digression to bed, I have always heard of this Hollywoodedly well-known document as a Bible, so that's what we're sticking with. I'll come back to this 12-page assemblage as we go, connecting the dots between its prosaic origins and the filmed final product that ended up on our many a screen. But before leaving entirely, I want to show one page in particular that really flexes its muscles and shows us what a document like this can do, coming off as both appealingly artistic and commercially understandable. Season 1 is a triangle. Here, in the most basic Microsoft Paintable of terms and diagrams, Noah Hawley lays out a classic storytelling idea in an appealing and simple way. This, he says, is a story that will end where it begins, but we will take a very scenic route to get back there. We'll start in St. Cloud, work our way to Duluth, wind further out to Fargo, then end up back where we started, good old St. Cloud. Now, as you might be able to assume, this simple page doesn't exactly reinvent the wheel, but also, it does. This triangular diagram is just the pointy version of what comedy writer, auteur, and problematic wonderkin Dan Harmon would call the story circle. In that circle, we start with a character in a zone of comfort, but then they want something. From there, they enter an unfamiliar situation, adapt to it, get what they wanted, but pay a heavy price for it. Then return to their familiar situation, having changed. Sound familiar? That's Fargo, baby! Also, that's pretty much the hero's journey. That's a lot of things. As people, we've only ever told like 3 different stories and have just found ways to slap new pairs of clothes on, if it ain't broke, and all that. And these formulations, both triangular and circular, contain an even more generalized version of a classic screenwriting principle. Have an opening image that sets the stage for the story to come, and then have a closing image that is as close to that first image as possible, only now changed.
To show that time had passed.
To reflect the journey and changes that our characters and world have undergone. Some of the most iconic films in history have delivered their own versions of this classic move. The Godfather, we start off with Vito Corleone in his dark office, and we end with Michael Corleone closing the door to an office of his, completing the transition into the new Godfather. We have The Graduate, which starts and ends with 2 very different shots that represent aimlessness or the feeling of being lost on the journey of one's life. And of course, Lion King, shout out my Simba heads, where we've gone from the presentation of Simba at the beginning to the presentation of Simba and Nala's cub. Friendship ended with story circle, circle of life is my new best friend. Now, despite this triangular rejiggering, Noah Hawley clearly knows exactly the tradition he's working in here, as this page has a fun footnote that is perfect for a selling document like this. Or wait, Maybe season 1 is a circle, in that Malvo comes full circle. And yet his story has 3 main points, so that makes it a triangle, right? But what kind of triangle? Equilateral? Isosceles? Does it matter? Are there different kinds of circles? Clearly geometry isn't my strength. All I remember about my junior high geometry teacher is that she had a face like a frog and usually came to class drunk. So let's just say season 1 is a triangle and move on to other, less shape-related issues. It's funny, and it takes the piss out of the perceived pretension of things like the shapes of our stories, but still shows mastery over what he's discussing. In my experience, executives love this stuff, which I can say firsthand, because I love this stuff. And I'm an executive. At the end of the day, all anyone on the buying side of Hollywood is looking for is confidence in the person that they're putting money on. Or, more plainly, confidence that they won't get fired for putting money on this person. And pages like this one, pages like this story triangle page, are like pickup artist blogs to incels. Real confidence builders. But like a pickup artist blog, its words are just that. Words. Promises that can, well, promise to bear out in reality, but that on their own are meaningless. No matter what geometrically compelling promises were made in word form, those words still had to be translated, and translated into darn good TV. And thus, one of the central challenges of show business. Anyone can promise to tell an interesting story. What matters, what the job of the screenwriter truly is to deliver on those promises. And did they? Oh hell yeah, they did, bud.
You're asking me to kill this man.
No, that was, I was joking.
Now, as a reminder, below are the 3.5 principles I have laid out for perfect pilot perfection, the tripartite prism through which we'll be viewing this delightfully dark piece of work. Number 1, establish an interesting, unique story world. Number 2, fill that world with compelling characters. And number 3, tell a great, capital D dramatic story within those confines. One that works in its own right as a single episode, and 3.5 also makes a dramatic promise of a season's worth of great stories to come. We walk away from the best pilots not just being impressed by what we saw on screen, but with a confidence in the showrunner, a synecdoche for the entire creative team, a faith that all of this, even its strange digressions, its weirder moments, more common in a show like Fargo than perhaps others, but all of it are leading us somewhere, and that the somewhere we get will be worth it, and that the ride there will be great. And believe me, even for the most talented and well-honed showrunners and show creators, that's not synecdoche easy. Honestly, that's a terrible ending line, and it deserves to be cut, but after I wrote it, I just couldn't, I could not include that. You think I'm going to slip in synecdoche and not call attention to it? Not in my video essay, pal. So like, what even is a story world? It's a thing that is, definitionally somewhat obvious. For the sake of a good exploration, let's get explicit. Okay, now let us describe the story world explicitly. Most simply, the story world of a given piece of fiction refers to the unique universe created by the narrative. It is the sum total of the particular set of characters and circumstances that work explores, along with the tonal sense of how those circumstances and characters will be explored. Wait, that wasn't explicit at all. So, with that knowledge in hand, how does Hawley establish an interesting story world within the confines of his pilot? And, amongst other questions, perhaps the most immediately apparent is, why here? Why Minnesota? Well, first we have to acknowledge the obvious. Because the Coens did it. Hawley was working with a prefabbed framework, an established blueprint, given that he was riffing on not just a great, but an all-time great film that was set in this same world. Which begs the question, actually begs the question, mind you, because the technical definition of begging the question is arguing in such a way where your premise assumes the truth of its conclusion. Wikipedia example, Coke is the most popular soft drink in the world. Therefore, no other soft drink is as popular as Coke. So, if I ask why it's a good idea to set Fargo in Minnesota, and I answer that
It's because the Coens did it?
Then the implicit idea that it's a good idea is simply assumed and not proven. The question has been begged. Also, I acknowledge this is not like the perfect example of question begging, but its modern definition twisting has been a bugbear of mine for some time, and this was about as good a chance to bluster about it as I was gonna get, so there we go. So why Minnesota? I mean, have you heard our accents?
Guess I married the wrong Nygaard.
Oh, for cuting aside, we must again go to the gospel for our answer, as Hawley actually answers this question at various points within this series' Bible when describing the setting. It's the story of a place where the sedate innocence of unremarkable American life collides with the lawless frontier, mall food and frozen tundra, Pee Wee hockey games on thin ice. And if you're a man who likes to push others to the breaking point, then Minnesota is a darn good place to be. Because polite societies like this one, societies where people repress bad feelings, where they bury them under the sweet red gelatin of Minnesota nice, are also the most violent. Put enough pressure on a man like Lester, as we saw, and he's going to snap. Holly also points towards the isolation that we can feel within these northern communities, especially in the winter times when the series is forever set. The endless snow, whether further than the eye can see on the ground or tumbling gently and occasionally blizzardly from above, are a compelling paradox, equal parts beautiful and foreboding, a landscape majestic but harsh, unsparing towards those who fail to treat her with caution. And because of this, society, especially polite society, drifts inwards, creating a capital letters in here and out there, with the out there being dangerous and the nearest town impossibly past the horizon, in unknowable and functionally infinite distance past the confines of in here. This alone paints a compelling dramatic picture, this tension of in here and out there, home and wilderness. But what Fargo does so well is take that outward danger and bring it over that threshold of safety, pushing it inwards. Lorne Malvo is a wolf with enough cunning to don convincing enough sheep's clothing to be able to bring his own brand of out there chaos into our homes and hearths. I'll spend more time on Lorne in his character section, but part of what's great about the story world of Fargo is that it is a world where a character like Lorne can exist. And more so than that, a world where he exists within a framework meant to contain and extract value from those like him. We learned of his keeper in this pilot episode, a Mr. Rundle, who's part of a larger bureaucratic structure that uses Malvo like a tool, an evil sawzall meant for a very specific set of circumstances. And though the full details of that organization are never worked out, they're also not really meant to. Holly's pulling from a well-worn mold here, that of organizational evil, which, dang it, is one of my favorite storytelling tropes. Looking at you, Weyland-Yutani. Okay, fine, you too, Umbrella Corporation. He just always wants to be included whenever I mention his older brother. Uh-oh! All of this, too, is without mentioning that good old lexical twang that suffuses almost every interaction. And while the delight of the Minnesota accent should be enough to merit its inclusion into any artistic endeavor,
Oh yeah, real good.
there's actually a lot of world and story-building benefits to its use here in Fargo. Firstly, it hides the savagery. As we've already quoted from earlier in the Bible, Pee Wee hockey games on thin ice. That Minnesota accent is charming. It's disarming. And what that means is you can use it to sweeten up some otherwise pretty messed up shit. See everything Lester's wife says to him in his first and later scenes.
Guess I married the wrong Nygaard. If you were a better salesman, I'd have bought you a nicer tie. You sure you know what you're doing?
These words hurt, and it's an impressive performance from the wife to be such a bitch, but find such a shockingly genuine veneer of, just joshing ya, that's really aided by the accent. Few characters who don't have that twang, Lorne being chief among them, by nature feel more inherently other, outsiders to this politely insular culture, the bad man amidst the good people, that monstrous thing with no desire other than to rend order into chaos. Distinct to the idea of story world, but distinctly related to it, is the idea of tone. Tone is one of the more ineffable elements of any given project, but it's also one of every project's key differentiators. Etymologically, Tarantino is famous for his distinctly Tarantino-esque tone, a phrase that I even use elsewhere in this script to describe some of the elements of Fargo.
Right.
To define it analogously, tone is largely just the mood or the atmosphere that a piece conveys. But to try to prod at it a bit more directly, tone is the manner in which a piece presents all of its pieces to us, the particular angle it takes towards the objective happenings within it. The story tells us what happens, and its tone tells us how it goes about showing us what happens. Fargo's unique, darkly comic tone is one of its greatest differentiators and one of its greatest selling points. There aren't really any shows that do what Fargo does in the Fargo way. It's an incredible balancing act, harder than one might believe until they try to do it themselves, to so elegantly juxtapose and intersperse such opposites. A laugh within a murder, a threat within a laugh, and to do so without ruining the impact of either element. I'll touch more later on comedy's ability to serve as a release valve, as a way to cut tension in ways that are ideally realistic, and to be able to work that valve to apply the proper release of tension without deflating the tension entirely takes the deft hand of a master. I mean, this is a series, this is an episode in which a man kills his henpecking wife with a hammer and, mid-murder, stops to himself to say, "Oh geez," before getting back to the murdering. Oh jeez. Oh jeez. That's not really something you're supposed to be able to do artistically speaking, legally speaking too. But if art is, as I will say again later, getting away with it, then that alone is an impressively artful moment. And this is a pilot built upon artful moments of away with getting just such as that. And this is a world that is built upon characters having moments like that, being able to have moments like that. And that freshness, that novelty, that, at times, strangeness, is one of the elements that makes Fargo stand out amongst the pack. An exemplar in a pop cultural moment overstuffed with media. Take all of these pieces, the unique landscape, the cheerily accented people, their roiling inner rages, the good and the evil, and the compellingly strange tone. Cram it all together, and you have a very specific, very unique universe. A universe capable of being populated by characters and stories with that same specificity. Stories that can exist in this world and none other. Do all that, and you've got the first part of your pilot down.
You're a good man, Vern Thurman. My sister was crazy telling me not to marry you.
Your sister is crazy.
The characters of the Fargo world are a huge element of what makes it endure. Here, I'll naturally focus on the characters that appear in the pilot, but the series manages to rather impressively keep those hits coming, with fan favorites like Wrench and Numbers coming later, along with Glenn Howerton's incredible trainer before his brutal end. But Fargo is not his story, nor is it that of Wrench and Numbers. Fargo is, at its purest, a four-hander, following Lester Nygaard, Molly Solverson, Gus Grimley, and of course, Lornathan Malva. Okay, yeah, no one calls him that. In the frigid world of Fargo, Lester is the butterfly whose wings set off a hurricane of wintry chaos. And to beat that metaphor to death, much as Lester does his wife, we first find him still a larva, a man so underfoot trod that even that wife, the ostensible love of his life, spends nearly every spoken word of hers cutting him down. It is in this sad, pathetic form that we meet the man who is, ostensibly to us, to be our hero. And this is one of the characterological tricks that this pilot pulls. It relies on well-worn storytelling tropes to get us on Lester's side, making him the subject of so much down-punching that we can't help but develop a rooting interest in him, a desire for him to transcend his unfair underdoggedness and show all of his tormentors who's boss. As a viewer, we can't help but desire justice, wish for comeuppance, and so curls the monkey's paw. For at the end of the pilot, we will get exactly what we want, but in a tragically warped and brutal form. And we will discover, just as Lester does, that what we wanted, what we desired for him, and perhaps in our hearts for us, was not what we needed. But stories are the journey, and our journey with Lester to this critical hammer-wielding inflection point is a very well-rendered one. After his wife's early torments, we find him at work, an equally pathetic specimen there, but it's on this street where things take a turn for the worst. As he runs into his bully, accompanied by his sons, to make Lester's torment all the more embarrassing, Hess begins to cruelly taunt Lester, escalating from your store-brand unkindness to high-end Seville Row bespoke malice. It is here that I would like to take a page from the show's playbook and linger. That is exactly what this scene and this pilot manages to do so successfully. It lingers. Scenes overstay their welcome. Torments like this one last longer than we would ever imagine them to, and then last longer still. The episode's climax, which we'll look at later, is a near perfect execution of this lingering, taking it to its formal conclusion by using its length as a virtue, continuing to introduce and reintroduce other elements of the story that we will have forgotten about due to the lingering, creating an ever-heightening dramatic circumstance that feels both surprising and inevitable. There's a Tarantino-esque, there it is, quality to this lingering and malingering, a delight in creating moments of dramatic intrigue and playing them out in real time, refusing to give us the cinematic release of cutting away, and thus injecting a true element of immersion, that real-life element of being unable to escape the present moment, being forced to soldier through it, even as things go from bad to far, far worse. It's powerful dramatic writing to be able to do this properly, as in an amateur's hands, you're simply left with a sloppily long version of a scene that could have been done much more succinctly. But as is done here in the pilot and at the series at large, we can see just how much dramatic tension can be squeezed from a single scene when we refuse to lose our grip. And as a final, painful, wonderfully characterizing capstone to this scene, Lester proves himself as pathetic as Sam accuses by flinching in fear, a flinch so great that he breaks his nose and earns himself a first-class ticket to the hospital, where, as is common in modern America, his real troubles were to begin. Here in this hospital, Lester's life is to be forever changed by a chance meeting with the bowl-cutted Lorne Malvo, who begins to prod, then pry, forcing Lester to confront sheer, embarrassing truths of his recent confrontation before posing the most important question that Lester will ever be asked. Are you asking me to kill this man? This floors the Lester, who, despite bumbling through an attempt at a response, never truly answers. And though he doesn't tell Malvo to kill Hess, as Malvo later points out, there's also something he didn't do. Tell him not to. As the episode continues, Lester will continue to face humiliation, specifically with his brother, in a particularly brutal scene where he learns that brother often tells his colleagues that Lester is dead instead of sharing the more pathetic truth of what he is. There are only a few moments that Lester spends in the light of liberation, having had just a taste of what a different way of living might feel like, in more cocaine-y terms. And it starts after he learns of Hess's death, and it almost magically feels a weight lifting from his shoulders, a weight that he's felt so oppressively throughout his life that he stopped even realizing it was there. All it takes is Lorne's explanation to him, colorful, evocative, but in simple terms, that this life of ours is a red tide, one where you think there are rules, but there are none. It takes this monologue delivered by a canine-bearing Malvo for him to change his ways. And it's his newfound boldness, this cock-of-the-walk mentality, this brief euphoria that was to precede the most brutal of come-downs that leads him to cross a line that he can never uncross. Because this Lester, this new Lester, the one who has seen what taking life into his own hands can mean, what throwing aside the rules of society can mean, how it can feel, this is the Lester that finally boils over when his wife does as she always does and turns the heat up on it. And thus, the come down. His power fantasy having been fulfilled, the cold shock of reality washes over him. He has killed his wife, and in his own way, his life is about to be over too. Here, desperate, he hatches a slipshod plot to bring Lorne over and frame him for the killings. As the audience, we already know the folly of this move, which is why watching it is so dramatic, so tense. We are waiting for the bomb ticking beneath the table to go off. But before Lorne can arrive, there's another inevitability to be dealt with. Vern. Remember all those minutes ago, they feel like lifetimes ago, when Vern said he'd be heading over to Lester's? Of course you didn't. And that's the whole point. That's part of the genius of Hawley's writing here. He wraps us up so intensely in the drama of the present that even obvious foreshadowing gets lost in the heat of the moment. But this isn't even his greatest trick. In fact, with David Blanian bluntness, he has already told you exactly what he's going to do. Bring Lorne back into the fray. But, once again, this time in bare moments, we have forgotten, because Lester's present dramatic circumstances are at such a fever pitch that we can't focus on anything but that present moment. That's when Lorne returns. We knew he was coming, but if Hawley did his job, we weren't aware of this fact, not in the thick of things. But now Lester's in his worst state yet. Not only has he partied to 2 murders, he now owes what is basically a life debt to a man who you really don't want to owe a life debt to. As Lester processes all this, as he tries to figure out what to do, yet another officer comes to the door. Salverson. God damn it, that motherfucker did it again. We knew she was coming here too. All roads were quietly leading to Lester's house since nearly the halfway point of the pilot. But Hawley managed to, well, I repeat myself, but to us, safe at home, warm, perhaps snugly, far from the evils of the moment, that shock turns into viewerly delight. For what else do we want from our television, our film, our quote-unquote content, than to be shocked and delighted? I mean, maybe to forget the ills of modern society, but go with me here, I'm painting a picture. Lester, back somehow against the wall for a 3rd time, appeals to Lorne, only to find him missing. Like magic, black magic, an evil genie whisked back into his bottle, only to reappear later when his evil has maximum leverage. The Fargo series had moments like these tricks of impossibility built into its very DNA, and this early one is one of its best. Lester is now truly trapped, until he sees a poster. What if you're right, and they're wrong? A phrase, however aphoristically banal, that perhaps in his own mind applies to him here, however obliquely. His fate sealed, Salverson about to put an end to his short-lived spree of crime, he makes an insane yet hide-preserving decision. That's right, he rams his friggin' head into the wall. It's kind of a genius move, really. I know I certainly wasn't expecting it when I first watched it over a decade ago at this point. Our story trope-aware brains are whispering somewhere deep down that our series lead is gonna get out of this, we know it. But man, did I not know how. That it's a bonk on his own head is also rather elegant too. Now the scene, to the cops, doesn't just seem to reflect a killer, but a serial murderer with a penchant for getting bonky with it. That's lights out for Lester. We end his pilot-long metamorphosis in the hospital. A free man, unchained, a victim, at least for now it would seem, in the eyes of the law. He would be truly liberated, truly a man who had gotten one over on the world, if not for one thing. A single stray pellet from the blast that killed Vern now lays wedged within his hand. A small wound for now, but one that will grow, fester, gnaw at Lester like a telltale heart, its painful thrum a constant reminder of his misdeeds, a scar that will make leaving this, the most pivotal moment of his life, behind him impossible. We, as viewers, can assume this, and the series will bear it out, but for now it's but a flesh wound, a soon-to-be separating symbol of the man who bears it, who, though now a butterfly, is about to begin another transformation, a rot that will mar him down to his very soul. Now that's how you write a protagonist. I'm gonna come out shooting on this one. Lorne Malvo is one of the greatest villains in TV history, maybe the greatest villain in TV history, though despite my general content buffery, I cannot confess to having seen all of the TVs. In the sea of excellence that is the Fargo pilot, Lorne Malvo is the ascended, palm-treed island that truly makes this episode, this season, this series stand out against the flat horizon. I would happily, and undisprovably, posit that the transcendent success and rendering of the Lorne Malvo character is a big part of why the Fargo series has been able to continue, because despite its continued quality, which in a just world would be enough to sustain a show like this for as long as it should like to be sustained, despite this, shows need standout characters to first make their impact in a content-saturated marketplace, something to rise above the understandable snide remarks that would come towards any television remaking of a beloved film. But why do we like bad men like Lorne? Villains are given that long leash, I think, in part because evil is what they are expected to do. They are, even at their worst, working as intended. After all, this was the era just after the apex of the anti-hero, with our Walters White and our Tony Soprano having wrapped up their stories either in tragedy or mystery. But part of their prevalent appeal was that anti-heroes very much get to have their characterological cake and eat it too. They get to be willful, dynamic creators of their own destiny, who do the things that we want to do, or think we want to do, and get away with it, who hatch elaborate plans and execute them, and their enemies. Lester, too, becomes our anti-hero, but in a blemished way. As fun as it is to see him get away with some things and deliver some amount of comeuppance to those who had punched down at him in the past, he is still always a bit sniveling, clearly out of his element, unconfident in a relatable but unappealing way. But Lorne Malvo, that man gets to have it all, because there is not a compunction in sight. And without these compunctions, he is able to pull off some of his most surprising, dastardly plans with aplomb. And there are a few things that we, as the audience, love to see, more than getting capable people do complex things that elevate the drama. And in the scope of the season, Lorne's plans start relatively small, though with a relatively constant factor of dastardosity. In fact, it's amidst just one such a plan that we first meet him, the very first shot of the pilot speeding down the highway with that telltale thump-thumping of the man in his trunk. Clearly, this isn't a good fella. Yes, I was proud of that. His first interaction here is a good starting point, anchoring us in his clear bad guy-ness. But it isn't until we meet him again, alongside Lester, that we start to see his particular brand of evil. Lorne is, by Holly's own gospel, an instigator, an anarchist, a collector not of things, but of moments. Moments where otherwise moral people are pushed to do immoral things. Malvo chases these moments, he manufactures them. They are more important to him than sex, or love, or money. Basically, he really likes fucking with people. Noah Hawley actually said that too. That's all directly from the series document, which is yet another reason why it rules. And it's here, when talking with Lester, still at his rubiest, that we start to learn the sort of man that this Lorne villain is. The performance is incredible, but it stands atop the rock-sturdy foundation of the writing. Did I say rock sturdy? Is that a phrase? Rock steady? Is that what I was going for? Here, we get to see Lorne Malvo go firmly mask off and reveal his true, baleful self, nearly hypnotizing Lester as he prompts him with what is to become the most important question of his life. At this point, we as a viewer get the general idea of who he is, but his next appearance really ratchets up our understanding of him, and it is a true delight. Because who hasn't wanted to go to the office of our worst enemy, call their kids morons, then stare them serenely in the face, and walk away? That's some real alpha dog shit, and part of what's appealing about it characterologically is how unaggressive it is. That's the beauty of a character like Lorne. It's not just that he's a killer and thus a breaker of our highest rules, it's that he's a breaker of all of them, even down to our most simple, politest interactional rules. And without following even these basest of principles, We cannot honestly fathom what that person is capable of. Perhaps that is not terrifying in its own right, but it will create a feeling of unsettledness with a shockingly similar amount of profundity. And to break even these simple rules, the implicit interpersonal ones society requires us to grasp, is a tacit acknowledgement of them. There would not be rules to break if such rules did not exist in the first place. And rule breakers of this variety are very compelling from a storytelling perspective. This is something we have seen in a lot of the media we've looked at on this channel, even from the beginning with Scream. As in Scream, if a character knows the rules, then they can break those rules. And if they aren't going to abide by those rules, then we have no roadmap of what to expect from them. Anything is possible. And the potential that implies is seductive. So it is with Lorne, and we quickly see the result, one that we likely intuited, of his recon of Hess, as he takes him from behind while Hess is simultaneously taking a woman who is very much not his wife in similar fashion. Along the way, I want to flag we have a brief interaction with Mr. Rundle, Lorne's so-called handler, in an introduction to the larger, faceless, bureaucratized, and corporatized evil that is to be always lurking in the fuzzy background of the Fargo universe. For what is a bureaucracy but a corporate maze? A series of labyrinthine chutes and ladders designed to deflect blame and deny accountability as a byproduct of the very purposeful specialization, or, with more sinister accuracy, compartmentalization, that can leave no one truly on the hook, no individual at least. Not when the reified abstraction of the corporation can instead take the blame, the entity that is a collective fiction that is agreed upon by no more than a piece of paper, one capable of being fed yeetily into the shredder, its sins absolved as it is cut into ribbons, only for it to then be born again, functionally the same, but as sinlessly pure in the eyes of power as the newborn babe. Under what set of circumstances could evil more fruitfully thrive? In my personal life, I play a lot of Dungeons & Dragons, and I have a paladin in the Waterdeep Dragon Heist campaign who is a manifesto-scribbling anti-capitalist, and his spirit was really running through me there. Shout out Vec Grimsilver. We're gonna find that Vault of Dragons, buddy. Our understanding of this whole operation will grow throughout the series, but for now, it's a great bit of world building and flavor for the pilot. Lorne's next few appearances don't offer too much in terms of new information, but continue to give us glimpses of this delightfully shit-stirring characterization. First, when he checks into a motel in the most difficult of manners.
You see, I'm a student of institutions.
And then pulls off what we can call a Lester in microcosm with the poor young employee, whispering devilishly in his ear to get him to, quite hilariously, pee into the gas tank and then immediately calling the front desk to rat on him. This is Lorne Malvo in a nutshell, extracting another one of those precious moments that Hawley directly calls out in the Bible, that he collects and cherishes above any other experience. Also, a quick Googling tells me that peeing in a gas tank won't do much other than require perhaps a flush of the gas tank and maybe a new filter. I'm not a car guy, so honestly, had no idea. But dang it, I feel lied to. Lorne Malvo, you're not a good guy. And Lorne, I think, would agree with that. He's got his justification down into a tight monologue, worth playing in its entirety right here, provided I don't get copyright stricken by YouTube, in which case I'm going to just play the audio over the worst still I can find of him in this scene.
Your problem is you spent your whole life thinking there are rules. There aren't. We used to be guerrillas. All we had is what we could take and defend. The truth is, you're more of a man today than you were yesterday.
How do you figure?
It's a red tide, Lester, this life of ours. The shit they make us eat. Day after day, the boss, the wife, etc., wearing us down. If you don't stand up to it, let them know you're still an ape. Deep down where it counts, you're just gonna get washed away.
Life, to Lorne, is a red tide, and we're just gorillas trying to hang ten our way to survival. Or something like that. He said it better, you get the idea. This is a key moment, what might in the feature world be called the theme stated, where Lorne, in very delicious metaphor, lays out his Hobbesian, leviathanic view of the world. He makes explicit what he has been doing implicitly this whole time, what we have called out here on this episode, acting as if there are no rules. Just gorillas jockeying for pole position in the rat race, if you want to, like, really mash up the imagery. He is terrifying here, Lorne, with perhaps no better moment than the brief flash of that hidden tempest within him when Lester mentions, figuratively, the court of law.
Who said anything about a court of law?
But through it all, his logic, however twisted, has a soundness to it. If nothing else, to Lester, it has a strong appeal. Only two more Lorne scenes remain, but they are some of his best. The first, actually, just before the first, is a scene when Lester calls him in a panic and Lauren asks him chidingly,
Lester, have you been a bad boy?
which is honestly just hilarious. Lauren taking the tone of a reproachful parent and quite clearly just getting off on Lester's anguish. His next appearance, brief but impactful, sees him killing poor Vern before quite magically disappearing out of Lester's basement. This is a transcendent moment for Lauren, almost literally, as it elevates this character who we've known only a short time, evil but very humanly so, to a pseudo-mystical creature, capable of making a functionally magical exit. The accompanying musical sting of Jingle Bells only serves to heighten that feeling. It's one of those moments of strangeness, of impossibility and unreality that Fargo rests upon, and it's just so perfect. Against this sequence of agonizing reality, of visceral flesh and blood killings, real-life consequences, friends and loved ones dying, Lauren seems to simply vanish into thin air. Less a man than an avatar of chaos, leaving Lester even worse than he had previously thought. But it's Lauren's final scene that truly seals the deal on his greatness. And that is no coincidence. As people, we are psychologically biased towards remembering two things: the final instance of something and the most impactful instance of something. It is called the peak end rule, and mastering its use is something that all successful screenwriters should strive for. You could say, everybody's working for the peak end, but you probably shouldn't. If I don't cut this, see you in the comments. Lauren ends his pilot-long journey with this final scene, also our introduction to series regular Gus Grimley, with one final, terrifying monologue cum power trip. It's Latin, look it up. But this is a powerful scene, a mordant spin on a known interaction, that which starts with license and registration, and one that, as we know from real life, never goes in the civilian's favor. But Lauren is no civilian. Through a combination of language both heightened and simple, he does the impossible: dissuade a police officer. But it's not just his threats of dragons and dark roads that get him there. It's his uncouth savvy, overhearing Grimley's daughter on the walkie and turning it into a threat that goes beyond even the officer. And once again, Lauren has broken the rules, not just the law, but those societal rules, the niceties that here, in polite Minnesota, are never broken. The full freight of his words and his actions stun Gus, stun us, and leave his simple and evocative phrases spinning in our head as he drives out of frame and out of the episode entirely. Henry David Thoreau once said that most men live lives of quiet desperation, but Lauren seems to have wrangled that desperation, conquered it, and turned it into something else. His is a quiet power, a silent fury, a tempest that is always a brew just beneath the surface, one that all who interact with him can see is primed to burst out with tempestuous fury should they cross this strange, quiet, crocodile-grinned stranger. What will Lauren do next? If one finds themselves asking that question, as I most certainly did, then Noah Hawley has done his job. While Fargo takes a blunt, unsparing look at the world of evil, so too it does with the good. And that good, especially in the pilot, is personified by one Molly Solverson, Noah Hawley's twist on the Fargo film's iconic Marge Gunderson. Now, the Fargo series goes hard in the naming paint, putting out some absolute humdingers of appellations for its characters, and it really sets the tone here, starting with Molly Solverson. I mean, that's brazen. If you ever try to write a piece of fiction and include a police officer whose last name is literally just person who solves, you're gonna get laughed out of the room. But Noah Hawley had the sheer literary cojones to roll with that. Art is, after all, as Andy Warhol said, getting away with it. And we love him for that, Hawley. And we love that for her, Molly, because its face-smackingly on-the-nose nature is fitting for who this character is. A pure-hearted, guileless, earnest solver of crimes. But in the pilot, Molly is, as we say in the biz, third banana. Clearly the third most important characters behind our two L's, Lauren and Lester. In other, less jargony schools of thought, she would be called the tritagonist, which frankly sounds a lot cooler, like if an isotope of hydrogen was cast in the school play. Shout out the three people at the center of the Venn diagram of that joke. We meet Molly in a scene that is in many ways a riff on the original Fargo. Yet another car crash on yet another endless tundric road, being investigated by yet another police duo. In that scene, in the original, Marge is a police work wonderkind.
Here's the second one.
A reversal of the more tropically expected dynamic here, and her decidedly not pregnant male colleague. Meanwhile, the scene in the Fargo pilot draws parallels while also charting its own unique course. Molly makes it clear here she's not Marge Gunderson. Not yet. She misses things that Verdon doesn't, but it's clear that there's a spark to her. She's eager, raring to go, clearly in possession of the giddy-up a good police officer would need, especially if they're to make a mark in the Fargo universe. Earnest, too, as shows from the first moment of her strong performance by Alison Tolman. She's good, capital G good, but at her job, she's not yet great. It's a strong scene to establish her character, but other than building her dynamic with the Chief, which we now know will end tragically, it hasn't quite pointed her in a real characterological direction yet. We get a bit more direction from her in the next scene, with her and Vern at the cafe, revealed to be her father's cafe, in a charming small-town touch that will charmingly come to inform Season 2. As she is abuzz with energy, sharing grisly murder details to her father with childlike glee. Here, we see that she really is capable of great police work, and she is just so flattered when the Chief says so. I can really relate to Molly here as a lifelong people pleaser, pretty much always looking for a pat on the head by those I look up to. You go, girl. And if that flattery wasn't great enough, she's even more deeply gratified. Flattered when the Chief says she'll be Chief someday, if she wants to. And she so clearly wants to. The script even says so. Her next scene, her next appearance, is more workmanlike, talking to Hess's wife, but ends on the incredible comedic note of her spotting the one Hess boy wailing on the other, and straight up dive tackling the assailant to save the day.
Who wants 7? Who wants 7?
That 217 she calls out, by the way, is assault with the intent to murder, something which actually comes through more in the pilot script than the episode itself. This version here is straight up murderous, and I think the ultimate change was a smart one. Also, and I only noticed this during my many rewatches for this essay, I love the framing of the two happy headshots of the boys beneath this window, where one is literally trying to kill the other. That is great visual comedy in an already great visually comic scene. When we see Molly again, we get to see even more of her powers, as if she's grown before our very eyes. Some really sharp police work as she manages to put together a series of clues that finally point towards our man Lester, and set off the series of chance happenings that make the finale so explosive. She's deflated, understandably so, when Vern goes to check on Lester instead of her. But, as we learn, that's all the better for her. In the chaos of discovering Vern's corpse, we can see how frazzled she is, rightfully but amateurishly, and the pain in her voice as she clears the house.
Bemidji police! If there's someone in the house, come out with your hands up!
By the time she walks out, she's dead-eyed and, perhaps, broken. Her bright-eyed naivete dashed by the worst of all possible scenarios. But it still gets worse. Her eyes drift towards Vern's back seat, and what does she see but those paint cans? We immediately connect the dots. It's great screenwriting to use such a simple visual, one that is instantly meaningful, to remind us of Vern's family, his home life, the tragedy of the baby to be without a father, the wife to be without a husband. And what audacious screenwriting to not write a word for it at all, to simply let the moment speak for itself, the dramatic circumstances obvious, the impact unmistakable. Also, my god, I have written Norm in this script instead of Vern every time. Great name pull. It's just like the same name in my head, like the names Chris and Ryan. There's a morning show DJ in Minnesota named Chris Ryan, and ever since then, those names are just interchangeable for me. But we do get one final scene with Molly before we're out. Most pilots, I surmise, wouldn't do this. But as we've hammered home now plenty of time, Fargo is not just a show about evil. It's about the good. And this final human moment between father and daughter is a really clear-eyed representation of that. Just a father who knows the dangers of this world and wants to look after his daughter. And a daughter motivated by the loss of her mentor, but motivated by something deeper, purer, to never stop in the pursuit of that which is right. Gus is a character that is to be important, but he's not there yet. When we meet him, he is just a dopey everyman cop, an active parent on the walkie with his daughter, with things seeming to be going as they should. With the exception, of course, that the Vikings are about to win a football game. For God has long since spoken that the Vikes and all other Minnesota professional sports teams will be cursed to a pained, lossful existence. His day continues as it should. A traffic stop for a drifting driver. We call drifting on purpose, by the way, in Minnesota in winter. We call that whipping shitties. The more you know. Apparently it's not a widely known thing, but like spread the word, because that is an awesome term. Gus pulls this car over, the car with Lauren in it. To him, just another citizen. But things quickly take a dark and compelling turn, with Lauren speaking perhaps the most threatening words ever that don't technically contain a direct threat within them. He speaks in a manner many great dramas love to indulge in, Fargo being no exception, in parable, of dark roads and dragons, and, most sinisterly to Gus, daughters, as Lauren overhears her on the walkie and knows just where to apply pressure to this simple man. And it's fitting, too, that Lauren speaks in such metaphor to Gus, because poor Gus is trapped in a parable of his own, though perhaps fairy tale is the better term, as Gus is now in the timeless mold of the good-hearted creature that runs across evil in the darkened wood. He is Little Red Riding Hood coming upon the wolf, still donning human skin to blend in, but with slavering jaws that can never truly be concealed. And that's a great setup. The Fargo pilot sets the tone for what is to be a series of delightfully drawn characters, interesting, unique, and almost all blissfully Minnesotan. We have Vern, the chief, who tragically dies at the end. He's really well characterized. In any other series, this guy would be a main character, a regular we'd follow from the opening to the closing, but not here. His death is tragic, a good man doing his job, coming across a terrible fate at the hands of Black Swan evil, and thus, an incredible dramatic jumping off point for the series. It's easy to forget, a decade later, the surprise of his death. That's one of the things that is difficult in going back to pieces of media whose end results have solidified in our heads and in the cultural consciousness. But on the first watch, in 2014, in the heat of the dramaturgical moment, his death was a massive shock and another piece of really bold screenwriting from Hawley. These sorts of events, these unexpected deaths of characters we naturally think will stick around. These are exciting moves, the work of an artist who knows how to play with our expectations and portend very well the season that is to come. Also shout out to Molly's dad, who will be played in season 2 by none other than Patrick Wilson.
Because some roads you shouldn't go down. Because maps used to say there'd be dragons here. Now they don't.
All great pilots must work on 2 levels, the macro and the micro. The scenes themselves have to work, have to draw us in, have to establish characters who we are invested in, whose episodic journeys we want to see through to their end. It has to string these scenes together in effective fashion, generating stakes that feel specific to the characters and that truly matter to them. It has to tell a story that seems to already be happening organically in this world, while also using that story space to introduce us to that world in comprehensible ways. It has to tell a story that satisfyingly ends by the pilot's end, but that simultaneously opens up an entire season, an entire series worth of stories to follow. This is, as I like to say about screenwriting in general, an impossible task. And the goal then is to just fuck it up as little as humanly possible. And as you can well imagine at this point, the Fargo pilot does just that. Hawley manages to tell a compelling story that lulls us to comfort with great scenes and great characters, then punches us in the gut with the climactic sequence, tying together all these disparate threads in ways both unexpected and inevitable, and setting up powerful stakes for the series. For Lester, will he escape? Will he be caught? He's the protagonist. But do we even want him to succeed? For Lorne, what chaos will he create next? He doesn't have any direct stakes or implication to the larger plot just yet, but by television convention, we know that he's going to be the driving force. We just don't yet know how. For Molly, her idol has been killed. What will happen to this good character? Will she corrupt? Will she step up? Will she catch Lorne? Lester? And Gus is the biggest cipher so far. We don't know much about him yet. We don't know where it will go, but as with Lorne, we know by TV convention that there's more to mine here. This good man let a bad man go. How far will he go to attempt to right his wrong? But we wouldn't be interested in any of those things if we weren't hooked by the story being told throughout the pilot, the plot beats that get us to that jumping off point at the end of the episode. Now, after this much blabbering, I've already covered most of the story of the Crocodile's Dilemma in various explanatory ways. I have talked about the fantastic characters, their introductions, their arcs, their dimensionality. I've talked about the climactic sequence that brings all those characters together in ways both surprising and obvious, directly called out to us as viewers, yet somehow shocking when they come to pass, a rare feat. But in the cable knit sweater that is Fargo, there are still a few threads of storytelling that I have yet to pull at. The Fargo pilot is a multifaceted and multifarious look at the characters we're to follow throughout the series. But if I were to boil it down to a single idea, it's the following. Putting us as far on Lester's side as we can go, before yanking us in the complete opposite direction. Little do we suspect from the beginning, the premiere season of Fargo is one that follows the Breaking Bad of Lester Nygaard, the meekest of mouses morphing into the lion, a morphosis shaped through the ineffable Lorne Malvo. We, as viewers, can pretty much always see that Nygaard is in over his head from the beginning. Lester knows that too, but only at first. By season's end, he'll be so high on his own supply that he believes he can get one over on the man who started him down this path, the pupil egotistically attempting to defeat the master. Bad news, Padawan. What's so great about Lester's journey is that, despite all the horrors he begins to accumulate, it's a lot of fun to watch, seeing him step up, grow his agency, decide to exert his will over the world around him. These are all elements of good drama, of a good character. Instead of watching an everyday man become a hero, we're watching him become an anti-hero.
Oh, Jesus. Oh, Jesus.
Hence the Breaking Bad comparison. And As in Breaking Bad, we get the double delight not just of watching a meek rule follower become their own agentic person, but to push past that, to claw at all the structures and strictures that turned him into a rule follower in the first place, striking back at them in the same way that they once struck him.
Fuck you! And your eyebrows!
Throwing caution to the wind as they go from passive chuds to active participants in creating the lives they want, the builders of the world they wish to live in. But it's all so tragic, so tense, so painful, because as viewers we can see what they can't. How far they overshot the mark, how much they missed the person that they wanted to be and became the person that they never should have been, that no one should be, all in the pursuit of finally achieving greatness. But it's not true greatness. It never could be. It's their definition of greatness in an unfair world that had all too readily cast its unfairness upon them in the past. Cycle of violence completing its rotation and beginning anew. Now, they are the agents of unfairness, and even as the price of their new power grows ever larger, they continue to live by that perverse truth. That, for their ends, any means can be justified. So it shall become with Lester, but so it has not yet gone. Instead, as we should in the pilot, we find him in the beginning of his journey, born ever further to his side, and given a rooting interest in taking his view of the world, because he is the one being trod upon, the one we are spending the lion's share of our time with, and as such, the one that we simply can't help but sympathize with. In watching and rewatching this series, in examining the script, in dissecting the Bible, I have taken what is quite naturally my most analytical look yet at this show and my relation to it. And what I've come to notice is just how much I still find myself rooting for Lester. Even after the events of the pilot, I find myself hoping for him to outwit the law, to escape justice. What does that mean? Is it the power of empathy? Of the psychologically known effect of mere exposure, bringing me to Lester's side? A side I would never otherwise be on in real life, by pure dint of the amount of time that I've spent with him? I mean, remember this effect in Breaking Bad as legions of fans hated Skyler for the mere purpose that she stood in the way of our anti-hero? People who would never support these deeds in the real world nonetheless were tirelessly, too aggressively rooting for their favorite fictional cancerous kingpin to do some of the worst things possible. In some ways, that was the lesson of the show, or at least one of its principles. The goal was to take a good man and to turn him into the worst of men. At what point would we, the viewers, no longer be on his side? Fargo 2 asks a similar question. It even poses it in blood-stained microcosm in the pilot. You have been rooting for this man. I, Noah Hawley, have wanted you to root for this man. It was my goal. And now, he has done something truly horrific. Are you still on his side? Hawley and director Bernstein even used the filmmaking form to suggest this, taking us for the first time in the pilot away from a more omniscient camera and bringing us into POV. We do this after Lester strikes his wife. We get to see that gruesome tableau, not through the cinematically distanced eyes of the invisible camera, but through Lester's eyes, through our own eyes in first person, and force us to reckon with what we have done. But then, quite craftily, we bring in the obviously evil Malvo, doing a more flatly evil deed, and putting Lester back into the same sort of low-status position he'd been in throughout the pilot, until mere moments ago. Can we, as viewers, not help but revert back to the same level of sympathy for him that we once had? Structurally, nothing has changed. Lester is a pathetic man in a bad spot. Only the nature of that spot has changed. But if our investment in him hasn't, what does that say about us as people? Honestly, I don't know. That's a big question, and one that didn't really come to me until well into the writing process for this essay. There are many possible answers. Perhaps there's no single correct one. Maybe we just want to see someone weak embrace a newfound strength. Maybe we can relate to the way life has beaten down on Lester. And who can't, in their own way, relate to that sort of thing? And we just want to relish that wish fulfillment of fighting the hell back. Maybe we're just bad people who like to see bad things get done. I'm not. I don't think that I am. This is a question that will be borne out throughout the series, of course, and its ultimate judgment towards Lester will be of the thumbs down variety. But at what point does that truly shift? Does it ever truly shift? Does it start that way, but hide it behind clever storytelling and screenwriting tricks? These are impossible, philosophical questions, but if an hour of television can prompt us to ask them, it must be doing something right.
Hey!
Help you with something?
Sam Hess?
Who wants to know?
Me?
I simply can't make a video like this without zeroing in on the elements of comedy espoused by this fine show of ours. Comedy, after all, is my way into the world. It's the lens through which I can't help but view anything that crosses my path. I have spent more time in my life than probably anything else writing comedy. Pilots, features, satirical articles, breezy pitch deck copy. I've worked at a comedy company for over 4 years now, and I even worked in the writer's room during the first season of one of the more successful comedies of all time.
Uh-oh!
So, hopefully you believe me when I say that the comedic undertones of Fargo, and at times the overtones, are one of its most important elements, one of the most powerful tools that it has at its disposal. I have a general theory for this, one that applies to the Fargo world, but for its generality, I believe applies throughout media. Every great drama is, on some level, a comedy. Said less hot-takely, every great drama must include some amount of comedy in order to be great. Okay, maybe that's just as hot-takely. But why must that be? I'll try to break it down. To be great, every drama, every story must reflect the human experience. And the human experience can, at times, be an absurd one. This is an undeniable fact. It's part of the DNA of this show, as we have cited how numerous times as Holly wanted to bring in that truth is stranger than fiction element. And it's that strangeness that so often leads us to laughter. In either case, in the authentically dramatic or the stranger than fiction, events must naturally heighten in order for them to be interesting, for there to be stakes that seem impactful, for there to be growth within our characters. Within that heightening, it's natural for things to get further and further from our everyday experience. The whole reason we watch dramas are to indulge in human narratives that aren't going to happen in our real lives. We delight vicariously in their unlikely moments. But the further you get from these daily occurrences, the further you begin to strain credulity, the further you seem to be getting from any sense of base, daily reality. As these occurrences build, so too does attention within the viewer begin to grow. A greater difficulty to suspend one's disbelief amidst ever more unlikely circumstances. And without any sort of self-acknowledgement, comedic or otherwise, these works simply stop being effective dramas. They move beyond that into the far less compelling world of melodrama, which is where comedy comes in. It's like a pressure release valve for dramatic situations. It can help cut through even the tensest of moments. Don't believe me? Ask any comedian how their childhood was. Hint, not good! But of course, it transcends being just a defense mechanism, though an effective one, Dad, and becomes two important things: a dose of reality and a screenwriting hack. The first, this dose of reality, is an easy one. Real life is funny, the degree to which may be a matter of opinion, but undeniably there are people in real life who are funny, and those funny people are very often reacting to their circumstances. And the more dramatic these circumstances get, the more absurd things become, the easier it is to bring in a comedic moment or observation, because comedy thrives on absurd moments. It lives there, has a summer home there that it splits with a colleague. So in this sense, on top of being able to cut painful tension, comedy also helps bring a sense of realism to heightened moments. Boiled down, you can basically use comedy to allow yourself to have more dramatic moments to further heighten your circumstances, because even acknowledging these sorts of strange happenings can be a joke of its own, a laugh of its own. And that's where it becomes a screenwriting hack too. In the biz, this is what's called hanging a lantern. Sometimes, alternatively, hanging a lamp, but that is the objectively inferior version. Hang a lantern is really any time the characters call attention to contrivances that the audience may also be noting, paying attention to, especially in a way that might break their immersion. When done well, it takes moments that could be straining an audience's credulity, something that inherently builds tension and makes them lean away from the material, and flips it on its head. It ends up building trust in the material through this sort of, oh, okay, this feels weird, but they know that it's weird, so they must still know what it's doing. To put it in Billy Madison terms, is the difference between peeing your pants on accident and doing it as a fashion statement.
Everybody my age pees their pants, it's the coolest!
And either way, when you use that comedic release valve, it lets you buy more, lets you heighten the drama more, go even darker, because you manage to take out some of the sting and replace it with delight, even if, as in Fargo, it's a grim delight. So, you know, that's comedy as looked at by nerds. Now, having strapped our professorial comedy helmets on a bit too tightly, And professors don't even have helmets. Let's see how this comes out in the material, and look at some of the funny moments of Fargo and what makes them so effective. At the beginning, this naked man jumping out of the trunk, if nothing else, this is certainly meant to get a laugh, even if a confused one. It's a great tone setter, and it's even cited in the Bible as one of the moments meant to reflect this truth is stranger than fiction mentality. Lorne asking for a sip of this stranger soda, then practically shotgunning it, is peak comedy. It's peak characterization, and practically weaponized weirdness. If you don't lean back with a, what the fuck is this guy? And literally, who would do this? Would you watch it? I worry about your public manners.
Your sister is crazy.
This last joke here not being played for a laugh and then hard cutting to a blow-up doll with those hilarious sounds is great. This moment leading up to it, it already feels weird, this interaction between Vern and his wife. It's a quiet moment, it's beautiful in some ways, but it also goes strangely. There's a joke, but there's no laugh. There's this lingering sense of tension, and it's only added to by the filmic choice of crossfading instead of hard cutting. That tension is cut hilariously with the squeaky arrival of the blow-up doll, which is pretty much always going to be hilarious. Blow-up doll equals comedy. I don't make the rules. It's a great lantern hang when Lorne talks to Lester and says, "So you let a man beat you in front of his children to send them a message?" The comedy here is great because it comes from such truth. Lester is being delusional right now, and Lorne just cuts through it with this hilarious line. It's, like I said, it's another example of hanging a lantern because Lorne is basically calling out what we're already thinking, what we could be thinking in regard to Lester's terrible attempt to spin what had happened to him. Really shows how smart Lorne is while also leaving us with a laugh. And I cited it at the top, but if you want to sum up Fargo in a line, it's Lester pausing to say "oh geez" as he brutally murders his wife. It's dark, but it's so funny.
Oh, jeez. Oh, jeez.
And here, Lester running into the wall, this is designed to be sort of chortle-inducing, I think. It's a great way of using comedy as a bit of tension release, while also playing to the moment. This moment is being played straight. It just so happens that running into a wall and then crumpling to the ground is ripped straight from the Three Stooges handbook. It also happens so quickly that its pure surprise can be part of the delight, since it's also, amorally, a pretty smart move from Lester given his circumstances. All these elements, as taken in their entirety, create a deeply interesting, narratively exciting, darkly comic, singularly strange pilot story. I want to touch briefly on the music as well, because it's something that really elevates the series. Fargo has a great soundtrack. The theme has this sweeping, grandiose, melodramatic with a wink feel that pretty impressively sums up what Fargo is. And I absolutely love the pure acoustic drum themes. Reminiscent of the Birdman soundtrack, which also included a purely acoustic drum sequence in its score and also came out in 2014. It's an interesting synchronicity. It shows that there was something in the creative ether of the era that led to this uncommon focus on drums. Drums, I think, are an incredibly interesting instrument, sort of the metonym for rhythm in general, which is the first and most endemic piece of musicality to us as humans. Why? Because we've got a heartbeat, we've got a pulse. From our first moments in the womb, we're surrounded by the rhythmic thumping of our mother's hearts, and then we begin to develop our own. There's even a body of scientific literature that shows that people tend to prefer music with tempi similar to that of their own heart rates, meaning that the rhythms of our own bodies has a relationship to the rhythms of our favorite music. I really like the jocularity of the drums used here and the classic wrench and numbers theme that has come to represent a lot of the Earl brand of Fargo. Unlike the Birdman tracks, which vary the rhythm and play with our expectations in ways that really well evoke the anxieties of that film, this track is more of just a straightforward banger with a consistent, driving, upbeat, propulsive tempo that also stands out for its simplicity. The sleigh bell stings within the soundtrack also fucking rip. They become an iconic part of the Fargo soundscape, and I love how they managed to subvert our associations with sleigh bells, as was the case in Die Hard, and turn them into something more sinister, foreboding, and honestly exciting. After years of watching Fargo, I've become heavily primed to get excited for shit to hit the fucking fan whenever I hear those sleigh bells are ringing.
I'm responsible for overseeing the dispersal of your dad's vast estate.
You mean the money?
Right.
The legacy of Fargo is not yet formed. It's still being fed into the pop cultural wood chipper while we wait to see what the shape of its wood chippy pile will eventually look like. Its most immediate legacy was direct, that of its sequels. As an anthology series, the legacy of the original is able to be seen more directly, as there is enough separation between the seasons, by the very nature of an anthology series, to view them as almost separate products, later seasons being influenced by earlier ones, in the same way that a band's previous albums will always inform their latest, even though they are separate pieces of work. And in that product alone, the legacy of Fargo lives strongly on. Its 5th season has only recently finished airing, and it was, to me, a strong return to form after the missteps of the 4th season. Chris Rock is an extremely talented comedian, but that performance was just not it for me. Prior to that, the series had been delivering nothing but excellence too, further separating it from its forever bonded anthology series brother, True Detective, who has yet to even approximate its lightning in a bottle first season. Meanwhile, Fargo went so far in the other direction that many consider its 2nd season to be more impressive, more quality than its first. Its 3rd season was great too, bringing in yet another string of talented actors, while telling what was easily their weirdest story yet. But even here, I stretch the purpose of this episode, as it's meant to look at the pilot itself. I think we can rightfully consider it the anthological follow-up to True Detective, whose excellence and popularity cemented the resurgence of the genre. It launched Noah Hawley's career, allowing him to make more of this wonderful show. 3 seasons of the absolutely bonkers Legion, which, if you're in for a weird time, is a rollicking good one, and even has him creating a new TV reimagining of the iconic sci-fi horror flick Alien, something that, in the hands of pretty much any other creator, I couldn't help but be cynical about. But here, in the hands of an auteur who is able to pull out an absolute magic trick with Fargo, the hope, like a xenomorph out of a chest cavity, springs eternal.
Rain check on the fishing?
Sounds good.
Love you, Dad.
Love you too, hon.
For crying out loud, how do you make a pilot better than this? Noah Hawley's Fargo burst onto the scene with masterful meticulosity, a virtuosic piece of screencraft that boldly launched a spectacular series and an enduring franchise. It provided the necessary firmament of underdoggery for Lester's anti-hero arc to make its full impact. It springboarded us into the singular world of Lorne Malvo, his cunning plots and his sinister manipulations hidden beneath his unassuming simpleton smile. It brought us a reimagined Marge Gunderson in the form of Molly Solverson, a force for good in a landscape still pockmarked with evil, and found her a wholesome match in the aw-shucks kindness of Gus Grimley. In the world of entertainment, there is ample reason for cynicism. Trust me, I know. And at its outset, this was a project deserving of such cynicism. But this reboot, this reimagining, this reinterpretation of a beloved film hit the ground with such force that it broke through even the hardened shells of our cynicism and let us access its gooey core of the characterological, blackly comic, filmically innovative, and the like. The entertainment world needs projects like this. I need projects like this, reminders of just what the medium is capable of, the thrills, the chills, the joy that a lovingly, carefully, Minnesotanly rendered hour of scripted television can cause to stir within us, within me. My Hollywood career has taken many forms so far. I have been an assistant for many years. I've worked in the writer's room of a soon-to-be beloved television show with comedians and writers who I would consider to be heroes of mine. I have produced podcasts for George Lopez. I have worked on projects with Bill Burr. He once listened to a song that I wrote and said that, I quote, "I fucking rip." All of these experiences have been enlivening, and I have been lucky to have them. But I have also written many scripts that will never see the light of day, released labors of love that have been viewed by, at best, family members, developed dozens, actual dozens of film and TV projects that are now relegated to the dustbin, never to be returned to despite hours of sweat and passion and genuine creativity being poured into their creation. I have had to stop using the phrase slam dunk, because not a single one of my Hollywood dunks have been slammed. But working on this essay, combing through this pilot again and again, reading its script and putting on my thinking cap, not just as an executive, but as a fan, as someone who got into this business because he was touched and titillated by works just such as these, has helped rejuvenate my love for what this business can do. A business that, like the world of Fargo, can be punishing, but one that, in similar fashion, is capable of delights of the rarest kind. And it's all thanks to this pilot, gosh darn it. built upon a Bible and conjured up in the head of a surprising creative who has turned into one of the new millennium's great TV auteurs. And though its seasonal reappearances, like our spirits, are often marred by delay, it always ends up coming back, giving us a reason to return to the frigid north, the endless snowscapes, the Minnesota niceties, the "ya sure you betcha" twang, the domain of evil, perhaps, but even more boldly so, the domain of the good. And that is a true story. And for the love of God, Fargo is in North Dakota, not Minnesota. That's where the crime syndicate is based out of. That's not where the